Ms. Chandra,
Present.
Mr. Anderson, go to Mr. Bentz,
Present.
Councilor Lube,
Here.
Mr. Cadman,
I'm here.
Councilor Goodhouse, moving on, Ms. Voigt,
Here.
Mayor Snyder,
Here.
Councilor Newton.
Here.
Okay, Councilor Anderson,
Councilor Goodhouse here. I had to close mine out and get back in because it wouldn't let me access the control panel.
okay. Mr. Bentz, are you there?
Yep, still here.
Okay. Shall we wait another minute for Councilor Anderson? Well, in the interest of time, Manager Wine, if you are there, City of Tiger Budget Committee will now reconvene and have Manager Wine address the items of city management, city council, and city attorney.
Thank you, Chair Roan. This is Marty Wine. I'm the city manager. The changes to the mayor and city council, city management, and city attorney budgets from last fiscal year to this year are minimal. There are no programmatic changes. When you hear about our work, actually in all three areas, it's focused on oversight, management of city operations, and all of the areas that you're already hearing about. Toby, next slide, please. Or whoever's running this slideshow. And key accomplishments in 2019 and 20, I would probably ask the City Council about accomplishments as well, but we saw our focus to be helping the council achieve their goal to be available and increase outreach to the community in many different ways. As I've talked about before, placing a local option levy on the ballot and the focus on communication related to that was another accomplishment of the year. We completed the 2019, we completed the performance audit, which set us up to be able to report better about what our departments are doing and is leading to work planning in all of the departments. And we also began an effort to become more data informed and make a better effort to measure what we're doing and report out to the community on that in our citywide report card. And the report card, we're going to continue to publish the report card, and we're going to continue to update the measures and work on doing a good job of letting the community know what the city's doing and how we're doing. Let's see. And this year, in the last few months, adapting our services for the effects of COVID-19 has been a major focus of our office, and you'll hear about this in the human resources presentation that follows mine. Just a note about the city attorney's budget. The focus in the city attorney's budget was on continued support for departmental departments and for changes to the city code. You'll see an increase in the city attorney's budget, and that was due to the shift, a transfer of prosecution services away from the court budget and into the city attorney's budget, and also an increase in those services for the photo enforcement program. Otherwise, there's no changes to the services there. I think next slide, please. In the city manager's budget, let's see, I've already talked about our achievement, focusing on helping the council achieve its goals, completing the citywide performance audit. We got started refreshing the strategic plan and the vision, which I've already mentioned, And I mentioned being more data informed. So even though the public doesn't see these activities, the focus in the early upcoming fiscal year will be on how our services and operations will roll out as we embark on a phased-in approach to offering our services differently in this post-COVID-19 era. And the priorities in the updated strategic plan are going to guide what we do going forward. I think that's all I've got on those three very small departments. Yes, that's all I've got. And organizationally, the city manager's office includes our human resources function. So I'll hand it off from here to Dana Bennett in human resources.
Good morning, or well, good afternoon. Yeah, sorry, our schedule got changed. Hi, this is Dana Bennett. I'm the Human Resources Director. Just as a reminder, we do human resources and risk management, as well as some citywide safety under my umbrella. Next slide. Some of the things that we have focused on this year, one in particular will be recruitment. We have enhanced our citywide recruitment efforts through a variety of avenues, including advertising, relationship building, and modifying the language of how we describe job opportunities in order to make it clear that we have an interest in hiring staff that are from diversified backgrounds in order to grow our staff to look more like our community. One of the other things we focused on was data enhancement. So we offered a Lean Six Sigma training class to a large group of managers throughout the city this year. We've also enhanced our use of data within our department. Some of that enhancement has led to some of our recruitment modifications. We've been focusing on employee engagement. That has been a particular focus post-COVID, and we'll talk about that a little later. We've launched a new employee recognition program this year, as well as a management learning system. Next is our workers' compensation. So that's an area where we continually look and manage that actively. So our workers' compensation, you may or may not recall, but several years ago we moved to a semi-self-insured system that increased some of our risk, but based on our analysis, that was a long-term improvement to the cost of the city. We've taken another step this last year, moving to a new carrier, where we were able to decrease the cost even further, but go back to a fully insured program. So we were excited about that, and that's been a great transition so far. Other than that, our big accomplishment this year has been just literally responding to COVID, which has been a huge function for both risk management and part of HR since early March, reviewing changes as they come out from federal legislation and the state, watching what's going on in terms of health recommendations, and just continually evolving on-site protocols to help keep our staff and community safe. Next slide. So key projects planned for next year. I believe it was a council goal on innovation, but it was also a performance audit metric from the human resources budget, which was to do some form of pay for performance. So we've married those two things into a pilot innovation bonus plan. Our hope is to create a program by looking actually at other successful programs that have occurred both in private sector and some in government to help encourage our staff to bring forward innovative ideas that will help improve the customer experience, reduce costs, increase efficiency, and in general, move city services to the next level. We also want to continue to work on creating Tigard as a welcoming city. We have a partnership we're working on with the Tigard Tualatin School District to, it's a two-way partnership, but what the city would be getting out of that partnership is a series of training classes which culminate in helping the city build an equity lens. It's been our goal for a while to do some auditing of our front counters, which of course they're not fully functioning right now, but they will again in some form, and it will maybe be even more important as we move into sort of this next phase of COVID experience to audit those services and make sure that they're accessible and welcoming to all. We also have a staff development project that we're going to work on this next year. Our hope is to focus that on supervisory and leadership skills. And then finally, we have safety projects which are underway. One of the big ones is actually, ironically, an N95 respirator program that has been moved forward in light of COVID. And so some of that work is already completed and should be finished up shortly. In addition to that, we have a Silica Plan, Silica program that needs to be finished up. That's been put temporarily on hold as it requires some on-site overview by specialists in order to complete. And so with social distancing, that has been put on hold, and we'll be seeking some sort of innovative ways to get that work accomplished this next year. Next slide. So our service challenges, as you can see, I have just said COVID-19 is our service delivery challenge. We are expecting everything from potentially dealing with staffing shortfalls should daycares and schools continue to be closed, and some of our staff continue to have daycare and homeschooling struggles. Training, obviously large on-site training is not something that's going to be viable probably for quite some time. So we'll be looking to innovative resources and partnerships with IT to help move training objectives forward. Engagement and onboarding, that continues to be an interesting, I will say there's a couple of my staff who have done some really innovative stuff around using Teams to try and engage staff who are not all in the workforce at the same time. Things like Tigard University, which was a program we put together a couple of years ago, which has been really successful as an onboarding tool. We're going to have to rethink how we do that, because putting a bunch of people on a bus together and touring the city and talking about our various different lines of business is not going to be a particularly viable alternative, I don't think, for a while. So we're going to have to rethink how we do that program, but I do think that that program is really valuable in helping new staff understand sort of the lines of business Tigard offers and just to be acclimated a little bit to the culture of the city of Tigard. And then again, our DEI partnership with the school district and Unite Oregon, we're going to have to sort of rework how we do those partnerships. So we're going to have to get innovative. And I think innovation is going to be sort of a watchword for us in this next fiscal year. I tried to go through that quickly. I know we're running a little behind. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. I'll just run down through the list. Unless, Liz, has anybody got their hand up in chat?
Nope, nobody does.
Ms. Chandler? Was that no questions?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Anderson, are you there?
Yes, no questions.
Mr. Bentz?
Nope.
Counselor Lube?
None from me, thank you.
Mr. Cadman?
I'm all set, thank you.
Good. Counselor Goodhouse?
None for me.
Ms. Voigt?
No questions, thank you.
Mayor Snyder?
No questions.
Counselor Newton?
Just a couple. Director Bennett, what's the cost of the innovation program? Do you know?
So my pilot program, I've proposed $25,000 as my launch program.
Okay. And if the Tigard Metropolitan School District, I've had discussions with some of the school board members that they may be looking at 8.5% cuts in their budget. Have you had discussions with them about how that might affect the partnership with the DEI, or has that come up?
We haven't discussed that directly. I suspect we'll still be able to move the partnership forward, though. Our discussions have been sort of put on hold as everybody has been trying to scramble to address COVID and whatnot. So I expect those things to start picking back up as we move into phase one.
Okay, thanks.
If there are no more questions, thank you very much, Manager Wine and Ms. Bennett.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is community development with Mr. Asher.
Thank you, Chair Roan. Good afternoon. Since you all saw me this morning, I've been to St. Paul, Minnesota and back virtually to watch my son graduate from college. And I have now recomposed myself to be able to give you this presentation. And I will be brief. No significant changes in the community development budget from last year, with I think the exception of a position in our building division. It's a hold the line budget, of course, you've heard that. And I also have not highlighted the COVID response in the department, of which I would say are key accomplishments, but you've heard about in other places. So let me quickly go through the accomplishments in the building division and then the planning division. In fact, I'll keep those two divisions separate as I go through my slides, since that's the way we're organized. Just to remind the budget committee that our building division is integrally connected with Tigard's local economy. And that's never been more true than in the last 2 months, where we have recognized that keeping this level of service high is doing a lot for the Tigard economy, not just for the contractors, but for everybody who relies on construction and construction-related trades for their income. And we had another good year. Tigard continues to grow with inspections and permits, and of course there are about 20 people, 15 to 20 people who help with all of that. The construction valuation of $125 million, similar to last fiscal year. I expect that number will be much higher in the coming fiscal year, if only because there are several large multifamily projects that are close to getting their building permits, many of them in the Tigard Triangle, and also informed by the fact that we really have not seen a slowdown of permitting over the last 2 months, simply because of the coronavirus. These projects continue, and our division continues to be very busy reviewing plans, issuing permits, and conducting inspections. We have been doing that virtually, so another accomplishment, for the most part, another accomplishment was figuring out what our standard operating procedure was going to be for remote operations. And we are, I would say, moving a little more slowly, customer by customer, just because of some inefficiencies that are inevitable with remote operations, but have nonetheless been able to keep a very high level of service in this area. If we move over to the planning group, go to the next slide. I'll include transportation planning here, and it's hard to fit all the accomplishments on one slide, simply because this is a group that does quite a bit for the city. We were very active last year in housing, especially affordable housing. We not only adopted the city's first affordable housing plan, but we were ahead of the state of Oregon in amending our code to allow missing middle housing to occur in the city. And I'm happy to report we're starting to see some applications for cottage cluster housing, for row housing, for those housing types which are an important ingredient in the affordable housing plan. On the transportation side, we adopted a complete streets policy, or rather the city council did, and also secured funding for a planning study of Highway 99. We were also active in Safe Routes to School, that's what that acronym is, SRTS, and are continuing to plan for more walking and biking to schools, and are applying for some funding for capital improvements for sidewalks and crossings around schools, although I will say this is an area that has been especially upended by the pandemic. Nonetheless, we're continuing that planning as best we can. You heard earlier in the Town Center Development Agency budget about the Tigard Heritage Trail and Rotary Plaza. That was a multi-year vision that was born in the Community Development Department. It's thrilling to see the trail out there, and one day we'll maybe all be together to experience it. I'm sure we will. We continue to oversee what I'm going to call mega projects. These are larger than capital improvement projects like the Southwest Corridor, which of course has light rail transit related trails and sidewalk improvements, transportation improvements, stormwater and environmental restoration, all of it connected with that project, and then a whole set of land use regulatory code changes that we're going to want to put in place to incentivize transit-oriented development, and just to make sure that every station that's built in Tigard comes with a strong station area community. And of course, River Terrace expansion, which this budget committee helped determined as a priority last year is proceeding. That's the south and west of River Terrace as we know it today. And finally, you heard Dana Bennett, our HR director, talk about the partnership with Unite Oregon on equity, and our department has been really active in forging that partnership. And we go forward. Again, back to the building side, in this coming fiscal year, very critically, we are moving to electronic document review. This is, I would say, a project that's behind schedule. We've been trying to migrate to where paper plans and paper plan review is no longer necessary. Many communities are able to do that sort of the review of drawings and specs electronically. We're not there yet. We're close. I expect that will happen. It should happen by the end of this calendar year, and maybe sooner over the next couple of months if we can get our ducks in a row. The building division is going to start a customer experience survey. Obviously, keep our levels of service high for permitting and inspections. We recognize that that function is an important cog in the local economy, as I mentioned. There is a position, I think I mentioned that as well, which will be very important for stabilizing our building permit services. And finally, the SDC program, which several departments have been working on for many years, which is to really get our system development charge program into a manual that can be passed from person to person or from department to department, standardized and consistent and trackable and accountable and all of that. It's being led by the finance department, but our building division has been and will continue to support it. Plan for fiscal year 21 on the planning side, I would just note that if you look at this list, it covers the entire city of Tiger. There's not a corner of the city that isn't being planned for now. I mentioned River Terrace South and West. Washington Square Regional Center, which is the district that is larger than just the mall, is going through a plan district update, and that is a plan district that is 20 years old and needs to be refreshed given the change in the world since the year 2000. Tigard Employment Lands tomorrow is taking a look at our commercial and industrial zoning and recognizing that it too needs to be updated because we find that there is a lot of employment that we are not able to allow in those zones simply because those zones were written for a bygone era where industrial meant pretty much manufacturing and warehousing and nothing else. And I would say that with this with the economy now shifting because of the pandemic, it is timely for us to be thinking about how liberal we're going to interpret land uses in our commercial and industrial zones to make sure that we are being generous in allowing economic activity to start and restart. Mentioned a little bit already about the Southwest Corridor. TOD stands for Transit-Oriented Development, and we are actively working with TriMet to make sure that especially in the town center, which is the Triangle and the downtown, our two urban renewal districts, which comprises our town center, that the three stations in those two districts have full and robust and very attractive station areas that are planned that will attract development of the right kind. And last, this was also mentioned, I think, in the city manager's budget message, our transportation system plan, or TSP, also about 15 years old, also in need of update. And that RFP has already gone out, and we are reviewing proposals to get a consultant team in place to engage the community in an overall update to our transportation priorities and policies. Last slide, service challenges. These are actually not small. I've said technology, equity, and public health. So when it comes to technology, we have learned very rapidly, if we didn't understand it already, that we really rely at this point entirely since we're working remotely on technology that works, software platforms that can integrate and that can allow us to do meetings like the one we're doing right now. And especially in my department, we've learned that the permitting platform that we use, it works, but it leaves us kind of on an island, and really has one person on staff who has to do everything associated with its upkeep, with any troubleshooting that comes up. And we are excited about moving to an integrated system that you heard about from our IT folks. And that will be really important, that we are able to make that move from something that stands on its own to something that's integrated with the city's finance and asset management and other technology software systems. That second bullet talks about equity and the equity challenge that we have in continuing to do all this planning. I would say that there is a webinar that is offered and that I attend every week or every other week on this question. If we're going to continue to have limited social contact and rely almost exclusively on online engagement, we're just not going to have good representation in our planning processes. And so far, I can report there are no good answers to that question. It is really a conundrum, and we have to continue to think about how it can be overcome. And last, there are some big picture questions about the long-term effects from this public health emergency on the development of cities themselves, how we will share space, especially public space, and how we will use transportation systems in the future, like public transit. You've probably read stories as I have, and it's all guesswork now about whether cities and transit and public space is going to be, more important or less important, or more frequently used or less heavily used. And right now we're just in a fog. So I would say that that's a challenge as we do our planning. But I have a feeling that as the months go by, that fog will lift and we will begin to understand more clearly what some of the long-term effects are from the public health crisis that we're experiencing. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asher. Liz, is there anybody with their hand up on the chat?
Nope, there isn't.
Okay, then we'll do a roll. Ms. Chandler, any questions for Mr. Asher?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
No questions. Thanks, Kenny.
Mr. Bentz.
Not here.
Councilor Lube.
No questions for me, and congratulations to your son, Kenny.
Thank you.
Mr. Cadman.
No questions, thank you.
Councilor Goodhouse.
No questions. I just want to say what a great job to be done. Like you said, Kenny, there's not a corner or part of Tiger that's not being done, and it's a huge undertaking, and you guys are doing a great job. There's a lot happening in Tiger, as we've talked in the budget cycle, with limited resources, but you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Ms. Voigt.
No questions, thank you.
Mayor Snyder.
No questions. Very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Newton.
No questions, just for members of the public. I understand that the position in building would be paid for building fund, through building funds. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's an enterprise fund. That's not a general fund request.
Right, thank you. And also, I can't believe that Abe has graduated. Congratulations.
No, you knew him when?
Yeah, right, way back.
Yeah.
I concur, Mr. Asher. Congratulations. That's a big milestone for him and for the family.
Thank you.
And I just had one question. Maybe you covered it or I missed it in the text, but under planning, professional and contract services are increasing about $200,000. Can you remind us remind me, maybe everybody else got it, what that was for? It's line 54001 on page 142.
And I don't have that in front of me, so it's possible that that is related to our community development block grant migration, but I would from into a joint enterprise. But I'll have to ask for a timeout and see if I can get an answer from you with the help of Toby.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time, and thanks for the very rapid and thorough presentation.
Thank you.
We will move on to Public Works. Ms. Wright.
Good afternoon. Actually, Brian Rager, Public Works Director, and with me today is Joe Barrett, our business manager. So let's roll to the next slide. Thank you. For this year, we as a department wanted to focus on some strategic priorities. There's an awful lot that we could get involved with, a lot that we'd like to do, but we found it necessary to focus ourselves around 5 key areas. And the first one is around our staff and how we're structured. We got some help from an outside firm to help us look at how our department's structured, because we grow over time, and we wanted to just have some help looking out to the future. And this also came on the heels of the Matrix firm performance audit, and there were some recommendations that came out of that we wanted to put in place. So some of the things we're working through include just how our reporting and management structure is, how it functions and how it's organized. And then we had a substantial issue in our parks maintenance division, where in the summertime we've got one supervisor that oversees over 20 people by the time you get the seasonal workers in there. And so that's why you see in our budget proposal this year an ask for an additional supervisor to help on that span of control. And we also had some work we wanted to do in our engineering division to help with some span of control issues there. Secondly, we'll talk about asset management. We have been doing asset management over the years. We've had a computerized maintenance management system that we've used. That's the MainStar system. We've had that since 2011. And that software has just kind of reached the end of its useful life for us, and it's just time to replace it. So as you've heard previously, we went into a full RFP process, competitive process. We looked a detailed look at 4 different companies and their software, and the Tyler system, to our surprise, came out on top. They've got a really impressive enterprise asset management software, and that's what we've selected. And as you heard earlier, that opened the door for the total Tyler solution that we're working toward as a city. Third, as we mentioned last year, we've been working on the future for Public Works, the need to move us out of the location we're in into something different, and I'll go into more detail about that in a future slide. Next slide, please. Our fourth area, we're involved in a lot of council goals, and we've just highlighted a few of them here. Strategy 1.1's all about communication and outreach to help our residents understand the value of the services that we provide. And Public Works has been focused on the 5 utilities that are on the utility bill. The adoption of the stormwater rate increase and subsequent communication is one example of that. Strategy 2.2 is all about downtown projects, and you heard earlier mention of Rotary Plaza, Heritage Trail. We played a part in that, and also we're heavily involved in the Main Street, Green Street Phase 2 project. Goal 5 includes work around the ADA transition plan that you also heard about earlier, and there's work loaded into this fiscal 21 budget for that. The fifth thing I'll mention, you're going to hear next from Lori Fea, our city engineer. I'll just mention that that team completed over 11 projects this last year, and at any one time, that group is managing over 40 projects, trying to keep them all moving. They're in various stages of either design, permitting, or construction. Next slide. Our key projects this year, again, the Tyler EAM system. We'll be working closely with our finance and information team teammates. That work is slated for second quarter of fiscal 21. Our second one, again, not to take away from Lori, but these are just 3 of the larger projects that you're going to hear about. The Cache Reservoir project, that's over $23 million in value. The Kruger Creek Stabilization project is $6.6 million. And then the 2 bridges that are in need of replacement comprise over $7 million. We're working on a coordinated strategy around the rates in our 5 utilities. And what we're trying to do is get them lined up such that they come to the council in a way that is a little more orderly than they have been. And we're in a process of getting them aligned right so that we can bring one to them about every year, and they'll have an idea of what's already been reviewed and how they look in relation to each other. And it's going to take us a few years to get into that cyclical process. It'll be about fiscal year 2024. Up until then, we will have some rate increases, but those rate increases are designed to basically carry us through till about 2024. So when we hit 2024, our plan is that by then we'll have the 3 liquid utilities, water, sewer, storm. We'll have them lined up. We'll review each of those individually, but we'll be able to bring to the council those 3 in a package that they can consider all together. Next slide. For us, service challenges these are repeats of last year. Our facilities, you've heard about that. We visited council in February. We talked about that with other departments. And for Public Works, post-COVID, that hasn't changed much for us as far as our facility needs, because our staff largely has to be here, especially our field staff. So we still are going to have the issue with overcrowded lunchrooms, and that's going to probably be even more of an issue post-COVID. Lack of parking, Public Works in general is we have a lot of big equipment, a lot of outdoor storage, so we're tight here on this current spot. And in the downtown area, we are considered a non-conforming use. So all of that together just makes sense for us to try to find a different location. Park maintenance is a repeat of last year. During the pandemic, we've been able to, as most of you know, we've closed our dog parks and our public restrooms, and because of that, we've been able to get away with not bringing on our summer seasonals as of yet. But as we roll into a phase 1, whenever the governor allows us to go there, that's going to change that issue. And then, as we mentioned last year, there are a bunch of new parks that have been added to our inventory this year, such as River Terrace parks and many others. We face some funding issues, and some of this is COVID related, the gas tax and our parks fees, like shelter rentals and just the recreation program is impacted because they haven't been able to run some of those programs. And like I mentioned, our park maintenance folks could use more resources there. Next slide. A service challenge around the implementation of our asset management plan. Anytime you change software, it's a change for staff, and as we go through the implementation, we're just listing it as a challenge because we know it's going to take a lot of effort from all of our staff, and we've learned over the years, thanks to our friends in IT, to not try to bend a software to what your work processes are, but rather to take your work process and adjust those to how the software is designed. So we will endeavor to do that as we bring on the Tyler EAM system. The last thing I'll mention is just, prior to COVID, we were having some difficulty with some staff turnover. We compete with a lot of different agencies, and some of those agencies can pay a little more than Tigard. And then we have the private sector that was also a competitor with us. And it'll be interesting to see what happens post-COVID. But one of the things we've done for our small green team, those are the folks that maintain our public water quality and detention facilities. We're able to bring on some contract help, a landscaping company basically, to help them through this time. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone have a question right now for Mr. Rager?
I do, Council President Goodhouse.
Okay.
This is something you didn't mention, but in the budget, there's the tree fund, which has about $1 million in it. It's from when developers have to take out a tree and it's meant to relocate a tree in Tigard. On that program, I think every year around fall we post on the city's website and media and so forth that citizens can get trees planted. I think there's a certain amount that you can spend every year. My question is, I've heard from builders that fund seems to be high, but they keep paying into it. Is that something that's meant to be an ongoing fund, or is that something that just diminishes when after all the trees that have been displaced are replanted?
I'm going to take a shot at that. We talked, thank you for submitting that question earlier, Council President. If I missed some things, I know in Lori's presentation, she might speak to this as well, because we do use that fund for a variety of things. One of them is tree planting, and we have a program in the budget that comprises of, I think we budget $150,000 a year. But we can also use that fund if we're doing some other mitigation work where we want to plant trees. So there's a variety of things we do use it for.
I guess my question is, why is it staying at $1 million? It's something where if builders are paying into it and then we're relocating them, is it meant to just be an ongoing fund, kind of an eternity, or is it supposed to be just spent down to replace what's been displaced?
Well, it's an ongoing fund, and depending on the year and the types of projects we have, we could burn more one year than we do another. Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out how to answer when builders are saying, why do they keep paying into it when the fund just seems to keep growing and there's $1 million in there?
This is Lori Faya. If you want, I can help answer that.
Thanks, Lori.
Hi, this is Lori Faya, city engineer. So that's an ongoing program. There's money that's been in it that's been collected. So when somebody's doing a development and say they can't comply with the on-site tree requirements, they may have to pay a fee in lieu. That's where that money comes from. We are using it every year. We try to just project out kind of an annual amount we might spend But in addition to the helping people plant trees individually, we also use that money for projects such as Dirksen Nature Park, the improvements in the Oak Savanna. We used a considerable amount of that money. We've used it for the new trees along the Tigard Street Heritage Trail. So we use it for both capital as well as programmatic work. And yes, it's ongoing and it's dependent on how much may or may not come in from development-based fee in lieu charges.
Okay. So in theory, if there was a point where there's no more development in Tigard, there's no more builders removing trees, then that fund would end?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler.
Councillor Newton, I have a question as well.
Okay.
I might be missing something, Mr. Rager, but I'm on page 117, the full-time equivalent positions in engineering. And if I'm adding correctly, you've got 2 additional positions, and in the description back in the project summary on about page 56, it talked about 1 position. Did I miss something? I see a engineering tech 2 is increased to 3, from 2 to 3, and senior project engineer from 4 to 5. And the columns last year was 21, this year's 23. Did somebody get reassigned or something?
No, what was the change in engineering tech?
It goes from 2 to 3.
Engineering tech 2?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
That's what it's showing.
We have 3 existing engineering tech 2s. That is not a change. One of them has been an underfill of a senior position, so maybe that was just reflecting that change, that the person in it is actually an engineer tech 2. So I think that probably is what that is.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the totals. We've got 21 and now we're at 23, so.
We did reassign one individual that was in the streets to the engineering department. That would also account for it as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Ms. Chandler, do you have any questions regarding Public Works?
No questions, thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
No questions.
Mr. Bentz.
None.
Councilor Lube.
No questions for me. Thank you.
Mr. Cadman.
Yeah, I've got one question. I don't know if this is budget related or not. I think there was a water main that was broken around Greenfield and Gardy a long time ago. Are we waiting for funding to fix that? Because I know that street's been closed now for a long period of time.
So I can address that. That's actually part of the capital improvement presentation. But I can answer that now. That water main broke a few months ago. It destroyed the street. Luckily, not too many people have to actually access that street, so it allowed us to keep it closed and wait for better weather to do the construction work. It's been designed. It's actually under construction right now, if you drive by, and the construction is proceeding really quickly. We got really good bids on that project, and I expect it'll be completed before the end of the fiscal year and will reopen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Voigt.
No questions, thank you.
Mayor Snyder.
I'm good, no questions.
Under this, I do have one question regarding sewer. A sewer maintenance backlog, a significant one, was talked about starting a couple of years ago. The page 126 in the budget shows that the actual budget and the FTE under sewer are going down. Did I miss something in terms of transfers of dollars and personnel?
Yeah, Mr. Ron, I'm looking at the FTE chart. At least in the copy I have, it doesn't show it going down. It it showed a difference between fiscal 19 and fiscal 20, but no change proposed for this next year.
And okay, and what I'm referring to is back to 2018.
I see.
There's been a drop in the FTE and a drop in the overall budget. And I think it was
Brian,
2018.
would this be due to the green team?
I believe it is, Toby. We carved out our green team about that time, and the idea around the green team was to pull some resource from sanitary and our wastewater and storm group. Even though sanitary sewer has its own budget and storm has its own budget, functionally they operate together. And so, yeah, that's probably what you're seeing there is we pulled one FTE from the sewer budget just in the budget itself.
Brian, this is Joe. Another part of the change is the fact that we've done some reallocation of positions, like with the utility director and our management analyst, and we had an apprentice program at one point too. Those have been taken out and combined either into water or public works admin. So that's also a part of the reduction.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, the moving around, might that explain some things? Might that explain how well, I was looking at utility expenses among several different groups, and those are lines 54201 and 54202. Several different budgets. The utility expenses went up a lot, and in a couple, they actually went down. Overall, is that part of the moving functions and things from one group to another?
This one may not be a case of moving one to another, but we did take a deeper dive into the utilities costs this year than we normally do. Like in the case of parks, you'll also see as things come on board, the utility costs will go up. In water, we have more detail now, so we can look at the true cost we're paying for electric on those sites and whatnot. So part of what I think you're seeing is we actually took a deeper look this year than they may have done over the previous couple of years.
Okay, and I did see that under parks maintenance, where the utilities have significantly increased in the last couple of years.
You'll also hear part of that argument in our issue paper coming up too. So
Okay.
There are costs we have not really captured in the past that we're starting to be able to communicate better now.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Mr. Barrett, Mr. Rager, we're going to, unless there are other questions, appreciate your input and your comments, and we will move to the capital improvement program.
Mr. Rohn, this is Toby LaFrance. Before we move to that, Senior Management Analyst King was able to look into the community development budget. You were asking in planning about the increase in the professional contractual services. There is that increase, that line actually would have been decreasing, except that we are doing the south and west River Terrace urban growth boundary planning, and so that's $285,000 of professional contractual services in that line item, so more than half of that line item, and that is money that there are expenditures that will be reimbursed through our agreement with MLG.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Faha, I think you're up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Rohn and Budget Committee. Good afternoon. So I'm Lori Faya. I'm the city engineer. And I've been trying to take notes this morning. A lot of folks actually made mentions of the capital improvement program, so I'm going to try to address some of those. Maybe that'll help in advance with questions. There's a lot to talk about. I'll try to keep it short. First, before I jump into things, let me just really quickly talk about what is a capital improvement plan. So I want to mention what is a CIP, who delivers it, how is it developed, and how is it funded, and I'll just try to really, from a high level, talk about those very quickly, because this is quite a bit different than individual department budgets. So the capital improvement plan is a 6-year plan, and that's where it's a very unique part of the budget document. The budget document in general is about the budget that's adopted for a single fiscal year, so in this case, fiscal year 21. The capital improvement plan allows us to show a bigger picture because it is a pretty rare project that only takes one fiscal year to accomplish. So actually I would call it a 7-year plan because it shows you the year behind and then what will be the current fiscal year, and then 5 years forward from that, what is the proposed plan for expenditures and priorities. The other thing about it is the definition of a capital improvement project is that you're either planning for or actually creating a capital asset. So something physical like a sewer pipe or a street or a park or something like that. It has a value of at least $50,000. We do have some programs that are like lots of little projects lumped together in a programmatic way, and then those programs have to be over $50,000 in value. So that's basically what the CIP is. Quite a bit of the CIP is delivered by the engineering division in Public Works, but there are pieces of it that are also delivered by a variety of the departments. So we kind of have a whole capital improvement delivery team at the city. So we have engineering folks. We also have some folks in Public Works operations, in community development, and in the facilities side who also deliver a few of the projects. The way the CIP is developed is I try to really focus it whenever possible on if we have a good up-to-date master plan for a given system, then let's pull projects out of that, because when we develop a master plan, that's when we involve a lot of internal and external stakeholders, and we really work on prioritizing and laying out what the next thing should be. So that's where we should be pulling the next projects from. Where we may be lacking an up-to-date master plan, then we have to focus more on reaching out and looking at project lists that various project managers keep. We may look at what different committees and city councilors and others may have as priorities as well. But we do have a pretty robust process. It's a little bit different with each of the systems, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but I just want folks to know that they're not just like picked by any one person or randomly done. These projects are funded primarily not from general fund, hardly any from general fund, except for a little bit of facilities. In general, they're funded from other sources of money, whole bunch of different sources. Gas tax, city gas tax, systems development charges in a lot of our programs, fees that we charge, so like monthly utility fees, those types of things fund these projects. Also, we've done a pretty darn good job of going out and getting grants or getting partnership money, and I'll kind of mention that when I get to the slide after this one. I'll mention some of those as well so that folks know where possible we try to spend other folks' money as well as our own on these priority projects. So accomplishments in FY20, Brian mentioned this already. There were 55 projects listed in the FY20 capital improvement plan, divided into different kind of large programmatic areas: parks, streets, water, sewer, storm, and building facilities. When I say 11 projects were completed, I'm probably undercounting. I know my management analyst would say I should say it's more than that, because we had 11 specific projects that were completed. We have a lot of projects that are still underway, like they were in design and they're moving to construction. We also have these ongoing programs, such as the Pavement Management program, which really geographically is our largest construction project annually. And that's not in the 11 because it's an ongoing program. So numbers should probably be larger than that. I will mention when I say projects underway is that kind of unfortunately our fiscal year system works such that it ends on June 30th, right in the middle of the construction season. So quite often with construction projects, we have them crossing the fiscal year boundary, which causes a little bit of effort, but we keep things going. Notable completions, well, Tigard Street Trail actually has been mentioned a couple of times already today. Pavement Management program, we're getting ready to embark on this year's program. We've managed to keep pretty well with our pavement condition index goal of being right around 80 out of 100. That is the point where it's most cost efficient. Your system is most cost efficient to maintain. So I'm pretty proud that we've managed to keep that there. We just talked about the Greenfield Emergency Project. That's nearing completion. Nadine mentioned adopting the Americans with Disability Act plan. Something that's a little bit under the radar screen, but I think it's super important and I'm super proud of it, is that we have some major maintenance programs listed in the CIP. There's parks major maintenance, storm and sanitary major maintenance. There's a bicycle and pedestrian program. We're adding a proposal for a program for Americans with Disabilities Act improvements in the right-of-way. These types of major maintenance programs are our opportunity to, one, address emergencies that come along, but better yet, we're working on dealing with backlogs so we won't have as many emergencies in the future. It's our opportunity to prioritize what I call the medium-sized projects, the ones that aren't just standard maintenance, but they aren't so huge that they should be their own unique capital project. In the past, those types of needs have kind of sat in people's heads and in spreadsheets, various places, and we've been really working to start to tackle those. And with a new asset management system, we'll be able to tackle them even better because we'll be able to actually run analytic reports that even tell us more about our major maintenance needs. And I'm also proud to note that we are keeping design and construction moving. It is not super easy to do that remotely. We do have some challenges, but we're finding ways around most of them. I mean, some things I really appreciate our IT folks. It's less problems than I thought, but sometimes things like running programs like AutoCAD remotely is not super easy for staff. But we are keeping things moving with the help of our purchasing folks. We're getting the proposals, requests for proposals and bids out the door, and I will say we're getting a lot of attention to our bids, and we're getting some good prices right now, and folks are I've heard a lot of comments about folks being grateful about us continuing to put work out the door, so we're really focused on that. Can we go to the next slide? So this is an attempt at a summary of the FY21 proposed projects. It adds up to 61. Last year was 55 projects. There's been some discussion this morning about a big jump in the capital improvement program and about some mention about funding from other sources. So I want to try to include that as well as I talk about each of these systems. In parks, I will say some of the big jump for next year is that we have a couple of line items for potential parkland purchases that we've been looking forward to, both in the Tigard Triangle and in River Terrace. And those don't take up as much staff resources, but it's the money that we need to have there. So as we see a need and an opportunity arise, it's available to us. And we see some of those opportunities hopefully next year. Other big things are we are moving into design completion and construction for Fano Creek Trail, for Universal Plaza, for Main Street Phase 2. And we added a project that's some safety pedestrian lighting improvements along Highway 99W that was going to be delivered by ODOT, but we managed to get the project ourselves so we could defederalize it, which basically means that it's easier to deliver. We don't have as many strings attached. So that's where you see some there. In the parks program, I will mention that out of those 17 projects, 3 of them have funding from outside sources. So in addition to our own funding. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned Highway 99 lights or Main Street under parks. So anyways, those are streets. That was a preview. So under the street system, in addition to Main Street and the Highway 99W lights, adding to the kind of the big jump in costs, Brian mentioned the North Dakota Bridge and the Tigard Street bridges. So both of those are in pretty dire need of replacement. One of those has a grant through ODOT, but those are a jump in the budget. We need to get those replaced. Those are high priority. Other things that added to the budget was the council adopted the Americans with Disabilities Act plan. We need to get to work on some of those things, so we added an element to be able to address more right-of-way items, particularly curb ramps. But we'll combine that work with the pavement management program for efficiency and delivery. And Wall Street, the rest of that street connected up to Tech Center Drive will get constructed. Out of the 17 projects listed for streets, 7 of those have different funding sources in addition to city money. And as was mentioned earlier by, I think, Toby, we had to do some quick juggling because we're expecting to see less gas tax and city gas tax revenue. So we did find a few projects that we could keep in there, but we could fund some of them more through systems development charges, and those funds were looking a little bit more robust. So you'll see that change, I think, with the technical adjustment. The water system, big projects. We've been waiting for these for a while. So Cache Reservoir in particular, Brian mentioned that's a $20+ million project. That's a big reservoir, pump station, and pipeline. We need that so that we can provide all the service we need to the westerly south development areas of the city, kind of the River Terrace areas. The ASR system, the Aquifer Storage and Recovery System, that's really our backup to our water system, and it needs quite a bit of work, and we're getting work on the rehabilitation of that underway as well, because, as I said, that's our backup system. And let's see, there's also, in the water system, there's also money that goes to the source supply through the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Project and through the Willamette Water Supply Project. So some of it is money that goes out to others to manage the expenditure. Sanitary Sewer, we're seeing a number of projects get into construction this summer. I'm very excited about that. A stream restoration on East Fort Darrydale, where there's an exposed sewer line. Sanitary siphon under Fano Creek, again, where there's a exposed sewer line. Both of those projects got delayed because of permitting and easement issues, but now they're ready to go. And downtown sanitary sewer line, which is repairing some older sewer lines. Stormwater, we 2 years ago, council adopted a stormwater master plan. I'm pretty sure it was the first one the city's ever had, and there was a lot of needs. So through that process, we identified a whole lot of projects. We've worked on funding for those, and now you'll see a number of big projects starting to show up in the CIP for that, particularly the Kruger Creek project, which is one of what I call our Grand Canyon projects, where literally there's such severe erosion coming off of Bull Mountain, it potentially threatens houses. Also, further out years, you'll see the Red Rock Creek system, which also has a lot of Grand Canyon problems with exposed sewer lines. You'll see that coming in line behind Kruger Creek, big projects. And then under facilities, and I'll mention under storm, we did have one project, Red Rock Creek planning, that is being co-funded by Clean Water Services, so that's some outside money. And then finally under facilities, the big jump for this next year is the Public Works facility itself. There's a need to replace that facility, and there is pressure to do it as quickly as possible so that the potential needs for other city facilities can follow behind that. So that's kind of the big jumps. I hope that helped answer some questions. Toby, can you go to the next slide? Service challenges. So obviously you've been hearing from everybody about the COVID situation. There's of course unknown impacts to funding sources. I don't think as bad for capital, but certainly the gas tax picture is important for us to understand, as is transient lodging tax, because we have at least one project that's being funded by that. And there's, I guess on the good side of this, as we've been putting projects out the door, bidding projects in the past couple of months, we've seen a lot of interest from the construction community. We're seeing probably about double the number of contracts go after some of our projects as we have in the past. And I will say I have 7 projects I could think of off the top of my head that we've put out in the past couple of months out to bid. Of those, 5 of them came in under the engineer's estimate. 2 of them came in right around the engineer's estimate. So we're not seeing big surprises right now in terms of costs. So that could help us have money saved in the future for other projects if that works out for us. The potential for project delivery interruptions I put in there because there's some internal and external things. Internally, it was mentioned just a little bit, I think by Dana, that doing work remotely does have its challenges for engineering, in addition to staff who are dealing with children at home and trying to work at the same time, which is just, it's hard to be as efficient as possible. It can be hard to utilize some of our more sophisticated computer programs on a little laptop at home. And then also there could potentially be disruptions to acquisition of construction materials. That can be both a COVID-based thing, it also can be a tariffs-based thing. So we need to continue to watch those. As folks have mentioned, it is a large CIP. We did a bit of work to try to right size it a bit. We do have some, as mentioned, a position added in engineering. We also have, we're dealing with a couple of key vacancies right now, and it has been a bit of a tough market to fill engineering positions. Perhaps that will get better. We also have a problem with not having desk space, and I don't know if coming back to work from COVID means we even have more of a problem in terms of the space we need between people, but we will work to resolve that problem so we can have the staff we need so we can keep delivering these projects, because that is our plan to deliver those. And also we'll be learning here very quickly because we have our annual engineering intern coming on board at the end of June, and figuring out how to help younger staff and mentor younger staff is a particular issue right now, but we're working through figuring that out. I've told the intern he has a job, and he was very pleased about that. The other thing that's I should have put on here as a bullet is alternative project delivery. So some of these big projects like the Cache Reservoir project, probably also the Public Works Building project, we're going to be looking to alternative project delivery, which means things like bringing in outside help to manage the project, so like an owner's representative, and also potentially doing more of a design build type approach than a typical design build approach, which may help us deal with resource issues as well as getting these projects completed. And then as a final thing, I'll mention that there are a lot of things we do as a city. We have a lot going on. When I talk to my compatriots, my other fellow city engineers on a regular basis, they are often amazed at how many things Tigard has going on. And so to be able to deliver a big capital improvement program, have to balance that against other priorities. And so I just wanted to mention some of those that, you know, we have potential of light rail coming through. That is a lot of staff time going into being prepared properly for that, because we want to get it in a manner that helps Tigard the most. Urban growth expansion includes planning for utilities and streets, implementation of the Tyler program, which is asset management, permitting systems, financial system upgrades, and other upgrades. We're going to get a lot of great things out of that, but there will be a period of time where there's going to be a lot of staff time that has to be spent in putting those programs into place. Even with help of a consultant, there's a lot of work to figure out the workflows and transitioning from one system to another. I'm looking forward to having much better project management tools. It's something we don't have now with our current financial systems, and part of project delivery is, right now, for instance, I will just quickly mention that our management analyst keeps a totally separate set of books for all of our capital projects, because our current financial system tools can't give us everything we need to be able to be on top of, in a timely way, the expenditures for our projects. I'm looking forward to not having to have a second set of books in the future, and freeing up our analysts to do more actual analytics for us. And then the last one I put on there was there's a lot of citizen interest in making sure that their neighborhoods are livable, and there's always a balance in how much money and staff time can we throw at some of the complete streets issues, like traffic, speeding, and parking issues. So that was a lot. I will leave it at that and see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Faya. And I apologize for mispronouncing your name initially.
It doesn't look like it sounds.
No, it doesn't. I'll run down through the list real quickly because we are running long. Ms. Chandler, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
No questions. Thanks, Lori.
Mr. Benz.
None here.
Councilor Lube.
No questions for me. Thank you, Lori.
Mr. Cadman.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes, kind of a question. You hinted on it briefly. It's here on the slide about with COVID and how it may affect maybe having some of the projects being done for less. So will we just kind of be updated as it goes, and the longer this kind of goes on, will there be possibility is it going to be future projects or some of the projects we planned out already that might change?
Yes, we'll keep our eyes on it. So just depending on the project and the funding source, it means more money in the fund for either, like we could add more streets into the next year's pavement management program, things like that.
What about any of the previous projects? I know that with some of the trail projects or something, a couple months back where we talked about some that with how long it took to plan it out and do everything, it's way over budget. Was any of those previous ones going to be affected, or is it more the upcoming ones that will be?
Well, for instance, on the trail projects, those are in design phase right now. The Fano Creek Trail project won't get bid until probably December. So we'll see if we continue to see good prices coming in regards to those.
As I say, I hope we didn't jinx it. We were looking at projects and the costs going up. We said we need a recession or something to happen so these can go down. And I don't think we meant for this to happen when we said that.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Voigt.
No questions, thank you.
Mayor Snyder.
I do not have any questions either. Lori, thank you for the comprehensive presentation.
Councilor Newton.
Yeah, Lori, thanks for that. I, kind of overwhelmed just thinking about all those projects. I kind of a reverse question. If when we get to the other side of COVID, I know a lot of these projects rely on funds specific to their, like stormwater fees and utility fees on stormwater and things like that. If we see reductions in those, not to answer specifically, but do you have in mind how you would make decisions about how to scale back the list if you had to?
Yes, we'll just keep an eye on it. I think the example we have is we already scrambled in the past couple of weeks to figure out gas tax, and we were able to look at, are there other funding sources? That's one of the things we would look to. But yeah, potentially it means maybe slowing down implementation of some projects if we see a substantial decrease in utility funding.
Okay, thanks.
I just had one question / comment for you. Is Washington County looking at another MSTIP in the near future?
I haven't heard if there's any changes to their program. They do that about every 3 to 5 years. So in the next year or so, they should be coming out looking for a new list of projects. We still have projects going on in the current MSTIP. We have Roy Rogers Road, 121st Avenue, and also still a signal at Bonita and Sequoia. So I think that's a little bit ahead. I think there is some question that will be interesting is Washington County is supposed to contribute a substantial amount to the Southwest Corridor Light Rail project, and whether they utilize MSTIP money to pay that may impact the size of a future MSTIP program out to the cities.
Yeah, a good point. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your input.
Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda would be the issue papers, but we have run into the 2:30 break period on the agenda. Do folks want to go ahead and do the issue papers and power through, or do you want to take a very short break and come back?
A quick couple-minute break would be great.
Okay, then we are recessed until 2:41. It gives you 5 minutes.
Thank you. Don't forget that others had questions that they didn't get to during the department presentations as well.
Yes, I have that on my notes to cover that right at the end of the issue paper discussion. Is that okay?
Sure, I just didn't want it to get lost.
Right. Thank you. Okay, 5 minutes. Did everyone get a chance to get a cup of coffee or what other break they needed?
Yep, thank you.
Yes.
Ready to
Just
go.
Yes.
Okay, if you're not on, answer.
Okay.
Ha ha. Ms. Chandler. Ready to go? Come back to her. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Bentz.
I'm here.
Counselor Lube.
I'm here.
Mr. Cadman.
Present.
Counselor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Ms. Voigt.
I'm here.
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Counselor Newton.
Here.
And back to Ms. Chandler. Okay, she's apparently.
I'm here. Sorry, I had said. Sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next up is are the issue papers. I think you're up, Toby. COVID-19 and the parks. Well, I guess Mr. Rayer and Mr. Barrett probably will cover those.
Hello, Budget Committee. This is Toby LaFrance, Finance Director. And yes, so what we're going to be doing with the issue papers, if you remember last year, similar to this year, our department presentations went a little long. So instead of doing full-on presentation of the issue papers, you've had those since Tuesday. I know you've had an opportunity to read them, and what we have is some staff available to answer some questions. I'll just tee it up by, hold on a moment, there we go. I'll just tee it up and tell you what it is that we're looking for from the Budget Committee. We've got 2 issue papers. The first one's on our COVID response. This is really informational. At this point, we're not really looking or asking the Budget Committee to take any direction. That doesn't mean that the Budget Committee couldn't on their own decide to take some direction. You've been hearing throughout and on this one, you've been hearing from the budget message to the forecast to the various department presentations about the many things that we are doing to help the community in response to COVID. Much of that we've been able to do within our existing appropriations, and we will continue to provide our services differently and in a way that will allow us to respond to the community's needs. On top of that, since the beginning, we have between the CARES program, RAFT program, the Tigers Utility Bill Assistance program, our expanded low income program, all of those between additional expenditures and deferred revenues we're contributing $1.2 million towards the community between now and the end of December. In addition, we've also delayed our rate increases that were supposed to go in effect in July and delayed those for 6 months until the beginning of January. And that, Scott, has an additional cost in terms of deferred revenues. So we're available for any discussion and questions related to the COVID response. The second one would be our issue paper on parks maintenance. As I mentioned earlier, this was presented to the Budget Committee last year. Budget Committee asked staff to bring it back this year, and the proposed budget does contain the service increases for the new parks. As you saw in the financial forecast, our Parks Utility Fund needs a revenue source for those service level increases so that we can maintain the new park assets that are coming online. So we are seeking committee direction on a funding source for that. And I believe it was Councilor Newton who pointed out we basically have 2 funding sources for parks: additional general fund or an increase in our park and recreation fee. So that's the direction and discussion that we're hoping to get from the budget committee on that item. So with that, what I would do is, Chair Roan, if you can maybe kick off our discussion on the COVID issue paper, and staff is here to answer any questions about that paper and any discussion about changes to the budget as proposed in regards to COVID response.
Okay, I will just go down the list unless somebody is already on, got their hand up on chat, Liz.
No one has their hand up.
Okay. Ms. Chandler.
Nope, this is on the COVID one. That's what we're talking about.
We will do the COVID one first, yes.
No, I guess I'm not quite clear on the ask. Are we just discussing it, or are you looking for action?
Well, they're not asking for any direction from Budget Committee at the moment. Well, I guess, are there any specific questions that have not been addressed so far that you would like to add?
Nope, no question. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Well, I guess this is just a question for Toby. Is there any area that you feel you could carve out a little money for relief of our businesses or our citizens that is not obvious to us?
I would say that the first place I'd point to is the obvious choice, which is the emergency reserve and within the general fund. That would be if we're talking about some form of relief that's not associated with a specific service, like the relief we've given through the utility billing assistance program, I would point the budget committee and council to the emergency reserve as the first option for funding something additional.
Okay, that's what I thought. No more questions, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Benz?
Nothing here, thanks.
Councilor Lube?
Yeah, so I just have a couple of questions directed towards the staff. As we look to move into this new baseline, which now includes some of our dog parks and possibly our skate park opening, and looking to move into phase one here, hopefully sometime in June, there are going to be some things that need some additional time spent on, especially, figuring out how to make our staff safe if we're getting more people into the building, cleaning the restrooms in the parks and those sorts of things, making sure the dog park areas are clean. Are there going to be needs above and beyond what's already in the budget to be able to accommodate some of the governor's requirements in order for us to comply?
Chair Roan?
Yes.
Marty Wine here. To Councillor Lube's question, I would say yes. I mentioned that all of the departments are working now to put together their phase one plans. We haven't enumerated what all this possible be, but they include the things that have already been mentioned. It could involve staffing. It could involve retrofitting our physical spaces so that we can maintain distancing. So, those are some things that come immediately to mind, but we don't have a comprehensive list yet. And some of those things are going to be, because they're COVID related, we may be able to find other funding sources, at least to get reimbursed for them, but we might have to make an initial outlay to make those changes.
Thank you.
Mr. Cadman.
Yeah, I've got one question for Toby. Let me get my video on as well. So Toby, as I'm looking through the document here, it seems to focus mostly on the spending side of the COVID issue. I'm frankly more concerned around the revenue side. Has your department run scenarios where we start to see mortgage defaults, which would impact our property taxes, scenarios where people just drive less for an extended period of time beyond the initial lockdown, which would impact our gas taxes. And again, if people are unemployed and can't pay their utility bills, we're going to miss out on utility tax payments as well. So I foresee a scenario where we lose a significant amount of revenue really, really quickly. Have the scenarios been looked at, and is there a plan B in terms of our spending if and when that happens?
The quick answer is yes. There's a group of financial staff within the city of Tigard and key programmatic staff in the city of Tigard that has met and produced the revised forecast that we sent to you last month. And a lot of the questions that you're raising are the questions that we undertook, and many of them didn't have. There was too much unknown for us to make a significant change to the revenue forecast. The proposed budget that's in front of you, the revenues that are in there have already been adjusted based upon the revised forecast, which was outlined in the memo we sent to you. So we have already reduced the revenues associated for COVID for the ones where we feel comfortable. When we've been talking about in the revenue forecast presentation, for instance, that we're going to need to monitor closely the fallout from the pandemic. The very things you brought up are the very things that we've talked about that we're going to need to monitor. So when we say we don't have to make any budget cuts at this time, I would say that the at this time is the key statement. If we start seeing a lot of the impacts that you're outlining, we'll have to adjust.
Anything else, Mr. Cadman?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Goodhouse.
Not a question per se, but I was gonna, for some of the budget members, with the different federal packages that are being worked on, with one of the last cycles, there was money that was given to cities that were 500,000 population and above, and there's only a handful of those in the United States, and they would either go to states or to cities. They're supposed to hand them down to cities, which didn't really happen of smaller populations. So there's a push now for on the federal level, especially with the National League of Cities, to get funding to the cities that are 500,000 and below. So something that's being worked on. Hopefully that's something would come into the city, would help with some of these expenses or some of the shortfalls in revenue. But it's good to reach out to legislators on the federal level and ask them to support that. Even if they're already in support of it, just give that reinforced statement, because a lot of cities like us, we're not as affected with other states that have sales tax or are affected right away, but we're definitely going to have effects and future effects. So I wanted to point that out. Is that something that there may be money coming down the road from one of the additional funding packages, stimulus funding packages?
Thank you, Councilor Goodhouse. Ms. Voigt.
No questions this time. Thank you.
Mayor Snyder.
Others have taken my questions already and asked them better than I could have, so I think I'm good.
You're a real gentleman. Thank you, Mayor Snyder. Councilor Newton.
Yeah, I think I just want to follow up a little on what some folks have already said. I've been talking to a lot of people in the community, and a lot of people are really panicked that are on unemployment and getting that extra $600. That's keeping them. They're really worried about what they're going to do when and if that happens. I'm concerned about people. You know, we've got this plan for affordable housing and keeping people in their homes, which is important. I'm concerned about businesses trying to get back and not being able to make it when we reopen. And then I read in the paper today about the 13,000 people that filed for SNAP, for essentially what we used to call food stamps. So to echo what Tim Cadman said, I'm concerned that we could get 3 months down the road and start maybe need to repeat some of the things that council's already done to help people that are food insecure, that are struggling to pay utilities, that assisting the county programs that help with rent assistance. You know, maybe I'm talking to a lot of people that are panicked, but I'm a little concerned about that. And if we go forward, you know, sounds like we could use our emergency reserve, but I'm also concerned about going forward with a budget that then we have to start cutting. You know, heaven forbid, we probably won't have to do layoffs, but if we get to that point, I'm a little concerned about that. So I'm just expressing that because I'm more concerned about 3 months down the road, quite frankly, because I'm not sure we know what's going to happen when we get to the other side of this. So I will just say that. And I also, you know, with rates, utility rates, if it's really bad, we've delayed rate increases in January, but if things don't improve much, you know, that's a way the city can help folks is by delaying rates again. Don't want to do that. That affects the good work we do, but quite frankly, we're a little bit limited as a city in things that we can directly do to help businesses and our residents out. So just making those comments, we need to be very cautious moving forward, I think.
Thank you for that, Councilor Newton. And I echo your concerns, Councilor Newton, and the comments that Member Cadman made. And I don't want to be an alarmist, and I'm not a futurist, but I have read a lot and done a lot of long-term planning and thinking in my business career. And my own 2 cents is that we really need to be thinking about another 2009, 2010 period coming real soon. The responsible economists that are not supply-siders that I read, and even a number of investment professionals just in the last couple of weeks have begun to make their predictions and forecasts. And there is no way this will be a V-shaped recovery. It might look more like an L laying on its side with a long crawl out that could be a couple of years, which echoes the 2009, 10, 11 period. As that planning for potential scenarios goes ahead, one example, we have about 2.2 million budgeted for revenue from the lodging tax. Occupancies in motels and hotels around the country right now are about 9%. 3 months ago, they were 70 to 90%. That's not going to recover anywhere near the 70 to 90% occupancy rate because with the social distancing, the CDC guidelines, and the other things that I have been reading about, particularly in lodging, they're trying to figure out how they're going to stay in business with average occupancies maybe as high as 50%. And restaurant revenue, buffet lines, and all that kind of stuff, a lot of it's going to go by the wayside. So that's just my, you didn't ask for direction, I'm just giving input. In other words, what do you, putting a number on it, what happens if the lodging tax revenue goes from 2.2 million down to 5 or 6 or 700,000 this year? Rhetorical question. Thanks for listening. We do have the parks issue paper. I'll open it up for questions now on the parks issue paper, and then when that's over, we will go back to holdover questions from finance and information services.
Hey, Clifford, before we go on to parks, I think Leah has a question.
Please go ahead.
I did, so sorry, thank you but I'm actually gonna wait. I think it's been partially answered, and if anything else comes up, I'll address it at a later time. Thank you.
Okay, well, while you're there, Leah, do you have any questions on the parks issue paper?
Questions for staff? No. But we're gonna come back and kind of address further during deliberations. Is that correct?
We sure can.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And Clifford, if I may, this is Toby.
Yeah.
Before we go too much further on the parks one, really, if I had to say the options on direction from budget committee on parks is we have roughly a $450,000 increase in expenses to maintain new parks. We can fund that through some combination of additional general fund, an increase in the park and recreation fee, and this paper has that increase at $1.52. We would implement that January 1 with the other rate increases that are currently planned, or fund balance. So you saw that the Parks Utility Fund can maintain for a couple of years. However, we do need to take some action sometime in the next couple of years to make sure that that fund balance does not go negative.
This is Councillor Newton. Toby, can you explain that last part again? I'm not sure I understood what you were saying. Thanks.
Sure. During the forecast presentation, I showed the Parks Utility Fee Fund forecast, which had the fund going negative somewhere around, I believe, is fiscal year 24-25. And that's because the current budget includes the additional expenditure to maintain the new parks. It does not include an additional revenue source. So the fund as currently forecasted is using fund balance to fund that additional expenditure. What we're hoping to get from budget committee is an alternative to that, either through general fund or a park and recreation fee increase.
I think this is Mayor Snyder. I think it's going to be very hard to have a really meaningful conversation about that until after we see the results of the levy vote, at least in my opinion, because I think we're going to need to make a lot of difficult choices, this being one of them. But my thinking on it is affected by that. So I don't know if this, we can certainly ask more questions and everything else, but I feel like that may be more meaningful after or for Thursday evening. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Newton, I have a couple of questions. Either Mr. Barrett or Mr. Rager, in looking at the issue paper, it looks like most of these parks don't come online this upcoming fiscal year, with the exceptions of the parks in River Terrace. Is that correct?
That's correct. Rotary Plaza and the Heritage Trail came on board this year, so you can lump those into there as well.
Okay, got it. And then I noticed that, you're sort of between a rock and a hard place, because the performance audit suggested that the department develop preventive and routine maintenance calendar for parks when you get your asset management system, which you don't have. So it was, your new system. It was suggesting that you use that tool as the basis for calculating staff needs. So I'm wondering, and I agree with the mayor, it would be better to have a more robust discussion after the election on Tuesday. But I'm wondering if there's an ask that addresses the more immediate needs for this fiscal year, and then waits on the remaining asks until after that recommendation, which I see the city and matrix timeframe was 2021 to develop that calendar using the asset management system, and then we could look at it then. Just a thought, because I think, you know, this is going to be difficult depending on what happens on Tuesday. So.
Thank you, Councilor Newton. Ms. Chandler, do you have any comments regarding the parks issue paper? Questions?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted a little clarity. I think it makes sense in some respect to wait until we get the results of the vote on Tuesday. But I wanted to understand, does that, if that does not pass, and that was very specifically written around the blue sewers, does that necessarily impact other areas? I just want a little clarity on that.
This is Leah Voigt. Can I kind of ask clarifying or see if I maybe understand the question, and then a city staff or someone could back that up? So my understanding would be that because that levy would help pay for police, which are funded out of the general fund, that if it doesn't pass, then it would change how we might look at potentially allocating general funds to help cover some of those needs. And that's why they're like a related conversation. Is that correct?
This is Jason, and yes, I that is in part why I was making that comment. I mean, it changes what we have to reprioritize. It potentially changes how we might solve problems. It may mean that we have to dip into reserves for other reasons, and therefore maybe can't prioritize the park stuff. I mean, it's all those kinds of things in my mind.
Sure, and I think it indicates sort of a temperament of the city in addition. So what is the appetite for Terrace? So I get that. So I guess for aside from that, I guess I don't have a question around the parks at this point, especially if we're looking at waiting until.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Anderson. Councilor Anderson.
Oh, I didn't hear you. I think, you know, it's probably a combination of both. But again, I too would have to wait until after the election to see what our options are.
Okay, Mr. Benz.
Yeah, I have nothing I want to add until Thursday.
Okay, Councilor Lube.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, just comments depending upon what happens on Tuesday for discussion on Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cadman.
I've got a clarifying question to ask. So I'm looking at the list here of new parks, and so question number one is this a complete list of the new parks that are driving the 3 FTE? When we spoke, I can't remember if it was in the wintertime or this time last year, my understanding is we had annexed or extended our boundary, or residential boundary, a fair amount that was causing us to have more parks that we would have to help maintain. Is this part of that problem that we need to solve here? Then the second half of that question, if in fact it is only 2 parks that are being added, why do we need 3 FTE now this coming fiscal year, the 2 new parks that are coming in this fiscal year?
You're seeing the parks in River Terrace are part of those new parks that are coming on board. The warranty has come off, and those will now be city assets to maintain. In addition, some of the newer parks, that, including those that we're bringing on board, like the Rotary Plaza and the Heritage Trail, and then in the near future, the Universal Plaza, those are going to be a higher maintenance need that will require staff to go on site more often. Those are the 2 utility worker positions that are being asked for. The new coordinator position is being asked for as part of the matrix report, and to help us better handle the staffing workflow and work charts that are in parks.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. Councilor Goodhouse.
Yeah, a couple questions. I guess to kind of, it's kind of been asked in ways, but not. I guess what's being asked, what I'm trying to understand is there's different points that these parks are being implemented, and there's one lump sum. Is there a way to break down what out of that ask of what is it, a dollar? What is that total amount there? The $1.52. Why? To be more clarifying, why is that all being asked now, and why couldn't there be a phase in where I don't know how much just for the River Terrace parks, how much that is, and then when we're looking at the future ones with Universal Plaza, and the trails down the road, what park that would be. And the reason I'm asking too is that, and I brought up before, maybe creative ways for the Universal Plaza. I mean, the landscape has changed, but I did look at maybe if we did like a downtown, some kind of a revenue source from the downtown businesses or buildings that would pay for that Universal Plaza. Maybe look at something different that would be an option if we just looked at taking care of the River Terrace parks right now, and then maybe look at some other different funding options rather than having it put on the utility bill, but maybe have the downtown urban renewal area, some kind of a tax that's put in down there that would do that, because in a sense, when things are back to normal, if there's events that are being done down there, those businesses would also benefit from that. But could we get a breakdown of what what each segment would be from that $1.52? So if we had to pick on Thursday night, we could say, okay, 30 cents is what we need to do River Terrace.
We could probably look at it, Counselor, from a standpoint of what each additional staff position or in the subsequent materials and services that go with it would be, but it may be hard to do it by park because I don't think we go out and hire, half an FTE or so. So we could look at doing it by each position.
Okay. I guess what I'm curious is why would we do all of it at once when some of it's not going to be needed for another year or more?
Understand.
Council President, I'll step in, Brian Rager again, because we put together a fiscal year budget. So, we're just trying to do our best at forecasting a full year of work. And so I'll just remind the budget committee, this is in large part a repeat story of what we left you with last year. And the parks that have come online are the ones we forecasted to come online last year. So like Mr. Barrett said, we could try to come back to you with a phase plan, if you will, and perhaps back out things like Universal Plaza that haven't come on board yet, and see if that makes a difference.
Yeah, because if we're looking at the Universal Plaza and the Lasage property and things like that that are ways out, it seems like why would we be collecting that whole amount when those are at least a year or more out, when that would be the next, we could discuss those the next budget cycle.
Well, the mention of the Lasage property, that maintenance is literally maintaining the property as is right now.
Oh, okay.
And there is cost going into that property right now.
Okay, I thought it was dated later, so that's why I was thinking that. Okay, thank you. It said assume maintenance in 21. That's why I was thinking that.
Sure. Yeah, it's just maintenance of the property as it exists right now.
Okay.
Anything else, Councilor Goodhouse?
No, I think this is all the, as others said, discussion on Thursday night to see how things are.
Mayor Snyder, anything else?
No.
Okay. Thank you all.
Chair Roan?
Yes.
This is Councilor. I had one more question. I know how challenging it is to supervise as many folks as our park supervisor is supervising, and I know that's why the recommendation was in the performance audit to provide some relief there. Since we're not, since we don't have seasonals at this point this year, is it a little bit easier? I mean, 12 still a lot of people. but are we in a little better shape since we're not using seasonals to this point? We still might, I guess, but is that providing a little bit of relief?
It provides a little bit of relief, but as I mentioned earlier, right now we're looking at the governor's baseline conditions, and we're considering how we might open up our dog parks and a few of the public restrooms now or very soon before we get to phase one. As soon as we make that move, that is going to put a pinch on our park maintenance folks, and I've already kind of started the ask, if you will, of our HR director to consider that we may need to start bringing seasonals on as soon as we do that. And then certainly when we go to phase one, that just ramps up the need.
Yeah, so if we start moving more towards a summertime load, if you will, where we typically would bring in seasonals, then as soon as we do that, we've sort of tipped the point where it becomes an issue for supervision.
That is correct.
That's correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Newton. And Mr. Rager, is that going to do it for the discussion on parks? If so, we can move to the deliberation and discussion phase. The goal today is to get agreement on any changes to the proposed budget and determine what will be left to consider on Thursday, May 21st. Besides the outcome of considering the outcome of the local option levy. At this point, I'm going to ask each of you if you have any areas of the budget you wish to discuss for potential changes. Staff will aggregate your responses, and then we can open up for additional discussion on each item. After a discussion, I'm going to call for motions, or any of you can make a motion during the discussion phase. If there's a second to a motion, we will discuss the motion and we will have a vote. We will then move on to the next item. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Liz for a roll call on any remaining discussion items.
Siobhan, do you have any items that you would like to bring up?
No items.
Okay. Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, this is a very small ask, but a little allowance for the Wi-Fi hotspots for the library, for the equitable piece of the internet. I would say something like $5,000. I don't know where we could find it, but that would be a start. And that's it.
Any discussion on that?
One, Councilor Goodhouse. I can't remember one of the meetings, maybe it was a council meeting. I remember I asked if there was a possibility of them reaching out to the different cell providers or different entities like that they might be able to donate those. So I don't know whether there was talks that they're being reached out to those to see if that's an option. So I do agree that we need to look at that, but also I don't know if we want to make it a budget item, if that's something where we could get those donated.
Well, I agree. I think the units themselves are fairly cheap. They're probably about $50 a piece, but it's the service that goes along with them.
And I don't know if they can provide that as well. That's where I think that's the unknown on that part.
Okay.
Or we could look at that. Maybe we'd have an answer by Thursday.
Councilor Anderson, are you looking at this for immediately or starting July 1?
Starting July 1.
Okay.
And one quick procedural item. Liz, if we can go through each member, we'll aggregate the concerns, and then if multiple people have concerns on a single issue, then we can kind of go by issue after we've asked everybody for their concern.
Okay. Chris?
I think the only thing remaining for me is item 53002, small tools and equipment. It's a 64% increase for police department and a joint DEA. Could we get more info on that? And is that really required by the police department, or who's driving that?
Okay, Counselor Lube?
Thank you. I don't have any outstanding questions regarding the budget, but I do just want to say that I think moving on into the deliberative stage could be a little early to try to do today. I know a lot of the way that I will feel about certain issues depends on the outcome after Tuesday. And so my answer would change between how I would respond to something today versus the outcome of Tuesday and the conversation that I would have on Thursday. So it would just be my suggestion that we talk about some of these issues, like Councilor Anderson discussed. I'm in support of trying to find some additional funds for some hotspots. But anything as far as a larger budget discussion, I'm just not comfortable having today right now.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I've got very mixed feelings about the parks maintenance request. That my understanding is this is in the proposed budget. Is that correct, Toby?
Correct. It is current. The expenditure side is currently in the budget as proposed.
Okay, all right. I'll wait till we get to the point where we're ready to deliberate, but that'll be one of the bigger topics I'm interested in sharing my opinion and getting the opinion of others on.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Goodhouse? Councilor Goodhouse, do you have anything? Potential changes? We'll come back to him. Leah?
Not at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Mayor Snyder?
I have similar thoughts to Mr. Cadman and Councilor Lube. I think that we're going to need to just have some really serious conversations about some of these topics. And I think the one about, whether all the parks expenditures programmed into this year's budget, whether that's appropriate depending on where things end up.
Okay, thank you. Clifford?
I concur with Mayor Snyder, Councilor Lube, and Tim that my whole attitude changes about several things depending on how the votes come out, and the library levy too on Thursday. So nothing now.
Thank you. Councilor Newton?
I'm sorry, I'm going to back up a little because I didn't get to ask finance and IT my questions. So if people could just give me a couple of minutes to do that. Central Services Fund relies on a lot of transfers in from other funds, which could be down when we get to 6 months down the road based on what happens with COVID. And I know the performance audit recommended some changes to our programs to improve asset management in our financial system. And we found Total Tyler, and we were all really excited about that. I know Council was excited about the adoption of the acceptance of the IT strategic plan in February, and then COVID hit. So my question is, what does it look like if we don't fund all of those positions in IT that you're requesting? Does it just make it undoable to do anything? Can we do it a little more slowly? I know ultimately it's going to be a much better system, but if we realistically can't do that as quickly, could you tell me a little bit what that could look like if we don't fund the total package now? We don't fund both positions?
So Mike could give more details. This is Toby. What I can tell you is we already have a measured implementation. I'd say it's neither fast nor slow. However, when you're talking about implementing something over 4 to 5 years, it already seems pretty slow. And so if we don't have all the positions, it really will make it difficult to do a good job of implementing. And something this important, I'm hesitant to have the city do it in half measures. Mike, do you have anything else that you'd want to add?
No, I agree with what you had said. I think historically we've taken $2 worth of effort and tried to squeeze it into $1, and I fear that we would overextend what we could do and how well we could implement that system, and how crucial the data is that's going into this system and the data that's coming out of the system it will affect, the efficiency of all of our departments, not just one of them, since this is a cross-departmental system. I also fear that, like we've seen with vendor-supported systems right now, they became stagnant and they didn't quite serve our business needs. And this is too large of an investment to let that happen. We need to be able to keep up with those requests and those changes over time. When we look at 4 years of implementing, the ones that got done in year 1 and year 2, by the time we're done with year 4, will already need to be looked at again and adjusted. So,
I don't disagree. I do think, if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. I agree with that 100%. I just noticed in the performance audit, they recommended adding a staff person, but they were talking about asset management and finance, and we've added some other systems, which is a good thing because then we'll have everything talking to everything else. But I don't disagree that we need to make the right investment. I was just concerned because of the reliance on central services of some of those funds that may be down this next year. So that's where my question's coming from.
One thing that may help put your mind at ease, Councillor Newton, for the general funding of the program, we have 3 components. We have the actual software purchase, we're going to have the software maintenance, and then we're going to have the staff on site that's going to operate and maintain the software. The FTE are those staff that are going to help us implement, operate, maintain that software long term, and that is going to be funded through the indirect cost plan. The purchase of the software is going to be made using fund balance that we've managed to accumulate and save specifically for this purpose within the Central Service Fund. And then lastly, on the software license and maintenance costs, once we are consolidating a number of other pieces of software, we're going to no longer have that software license and maintenance costs. Tyler will be a little expensive than those were. It's a better system. It's better. It has better support. So we're going to pay for that. That said, it's the offset from not having to pay for the other systems is significant, and it will be a minor increase in that cost.
Okay, thanks.
This is Liz. And Chris, are you there still?
Hi,
Still
this
here.
is Lisa.
Hi.
Oh,
This is Lisa
okay,
Shaw, the business manager for police. Liz, is it my turn?
Well, I was just making sure Chris was there so he could hear you because he's the one that asked the question. Chris, are you there?
Yep.
Okay. And now we have Lisa Shaw on, the business manager for the police department, to answer your question on the 53002.
Hi, yes, this is Lisa Shaw, the business manager for the police department. And yes, primarily the increase in Object Code 53002 small equipment is related to our increase within the asset forfeiture fund. This is separate from the general fund. And asset forfeiture funds, we receive a portion of proceeds from seized materials and cash from drug interdiction work based on the DEA task force that we're a member of. And those funds we have increased. We have recognized additional cash balance, and some of this will go towards funding perhaps our dash cam project and other related equipment in the police department.
So Lisa, does that mean that there's really about a net out of the general fund for around 112,000 for small tools, because roughly 275,000 comes from Justice, Treasury, and local?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Is the net then out of the general fund for small tools roughly 112,000, if my math is right? Because a significant portion of the 387 comes from Justice, Treasury, and local forfeitures.
I would have to check that. I mean, we do have a line item budget in our general fund operating budget for small tools and equipment that we utilize every year, whether that's for guns and other equipment that goes into our patrol cars and other equipment that the officers utilize. Would you like me to look up the exact amount that's in our general fund portion?
Well, I pulled those numbers from a couple different spots because of the way the description is in the budget package, and it sounds like what you described is where I resolved that. And really, the bottom line of the question is the net coming out of the general fund is around 112,000. It's not 387.
Sir, I'm not sure what you mean by coming out of. We have we have small tools and equipment that are identified in our base budget for general fund, and then we also have some within the asset forfeiture fund. And the asset forfeiture fund is very strictly monitored, and we have strict guidelines that we have to follow from the Department of Justice on how we use those. So I want to make sure I understand your question.
I'm looking at, if you have it in front of you, I'm looking at pages 72 and 73.
I don't know what you're looking at, sir. I'm sorry, I don't have that.
Okay. On those pages, it shows what the resources are and what the expenses are. And in there, well, it's more than just 72 and 73.
If I might be able to help, this is Toby. I'm looking at page 71, which is the police operations line item budget in the proposed budget document. And on that page, it does have that 53002 small tools and equipment proposed for fiscal year 21 is $112,000, as you mentioned. It's actually $112,750. That's very similar to the dollar figure that was budgeted in fiscal year 20 of $106,350, and that is coming out of that is budgeted in general fund. So it's the general fund portion of police operations. Police operations is then supplemented by the forfeitures fund, where if we receive the forfeitures resources, we will be able to use that up for some specific small tools and equipment for our police force.
And I don't think we had any increase in our general fund small tools budget. I think that's a baseline about what we spend for our sort of regular ongoing needs.
Okay. Yeah, that ultimately answers my question. So the increase that we saw in the email was purely from the extra forfeitures, so it's not like we can reallocate that. So that's really what I was trying to get at.
Correct. We cannot reallocate that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So this is Liz again. Is Counselor Goodhouse back?
Yeah, I'm back. Somehow I got kicked out, and like the link was gone, and so I had to search around. So I don't know what happened.
So we're looking at if you have any potential changes to the budget that you wanted to discuss.
Two I want to discuss. One was the community event section. I'm just curious what's going to be done with that, or what discussion we need to have with that, with the balloon festival and the fireworks and things like that, with the money that's going to those, or with Broadway roads being closed. Are we still just giving those amounts to those organizations as they have costs to cover still, or if that's something where those organizations may not need those, and if we need to reconvene and figure out where we need to distribute those funds to, what may change now since the events are being changed, and what we'll do with those monies. That's the first one. And the second one, and I know Toby was checking into this and was going to get back on Thursday, but just with kind of how the money coming into the general fund for MLG money, TriMet, things like that, how that's going to be shown in there. And the reason I'm just pointing that out is I think it's important for the public when they look at our budget and we talk about how we're needing extra money for police and things like that. It's good to be able to see and point to the public that we are thinking outside the box and having other entities pay for our staff time.
Thank you. So I think we've gone through the budget committee member list and gathered these potential changes that they're interested in.
Quick question. Did Councilor Newton get to ask all of her questions that she wanted?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Do we need a recap, Liz, of any things that we might carry forward out of the last 20 minutes or so to Thursday?
Well, I have a couple of recaps. The first one, questions from staff. Clifford, you asked about police department and overtime, and that is something that we will get to you. And then also, let's see, the phase-in of and fund balance, basically the parks question. Councilor Anderson has the Wi-Fi hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Chris's question was answered. Councilor Goodhouse, community events and general fund MLG. And then Mayor Snyder, Cliff, Tim, and Councilor Lube all want to talk more about a little detailed parks maintenance and this budget after the levy results.
Okay.
Just one add-on was MLG and then TriMet future money from the MOU that's going to be paying for staff time.
Okay. Anything else?
This is Leah Voigt. I have a question. Just talking about Tuesday and how the election might change. With libraries, I'm, hoping that it doesn't have to come to this, but do we have kind of a staff proposal or backup suggested way forwards if the library levy doesn't pass, in terms of like recommendations for budget committee to consider on Thursday?
Director Halstead, do you have a comment on that?
I do. Hi there. Just checking in. So to be clear, the funding that comes from the levy renewal is 25% of the library's funding. So it's kind of funny because we normally think we get 60% of our funding from the county, but this was explained to me by WCCLS manager Lisa Tattersall that only 25% of the funding is actually from the levy itself. So we do have some staffing considerations. We're working on a plan in case that levy does not pass. I can give further details on Thursday if you prefer, but we do have some plans in place.
This is Councilor Lube. Can I also add that the levy is actually for 2021 to 2022? It's not for
Yes.
this current year that we're budgeting.
Right.
So I think that gives us a little bit of leeway.
It does.
Thank you for that clarification. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries. It's a good question.
Thanks, everyone. Anything else that we've missed? Anything else that you found in your notes that you feel we need to put out on the table? Anything else you want to add to the list of things for Thursday? I would ask Toby and Liz, maybe Manager Wine, do you feel you have a clear direction on what needs to be accumulated for Thursday's discussion? I know it includes a bunch of potential options, but the specific questions that were asked and then the hanging chads out there in terms of the what ifs. Toby?
So I would say, yes, we need to, there's a couple of things I think will be pretty straightforward where we can provide some of them are just simply informational, such as the NLG and the police overtime. For others, we can come with further information and options or recommendations from options for the budget committee or recommendations from staff. And really, it sounds like a lot of this, especially if it comes to general fund, will be pending based upon the outcome of the levy vote and what steps the city wants to take with both a passage and with a potential failure of that police levy. So I think we can pull together some documentation and hopefully, because we've got a tight turnaround, hopefully we can get you most of our materials. We'll aim for Wednesday, so you might have to do some reading on Thursday and or Wednesday night and Thursday during the day. So Chair Roan, would that work?
I think it will have to under the circumstances, Toby. Thank you.
Okay.
Manager.
Councilor Goodhouse.
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to, we were reading off the items from the budget, but from the questions that were asked from the parks question, is that going to be in there too, as far as what, or do we need to repeat those as we had a question on that more pointed without us asking if there's a way to break down the different amounts, and we could do that in stages if we do look at that. Is that going to be in, do we need to repeat that, or has that already been taken note from that discussion?
I believe I saw some comment that was being taken care of. Joe, can you expound on that?
We will have it before Wednesday. We're going to meet on Monday and try and put some numbers and some scenarios together for council.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. I didn't know since we were going through this that if we were doing the tally now, these were the only things, or if that also was being included. So I wanted to just double check. Thank you.
You bet.
Manager Wine, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Should I go through the roll one more time just to make sure everybody's had a chance, and then we will move for recess to Thursday? Ms. Chandler.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
I'm good.
Thank you. Mr. Bentz.
All good here. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Lube.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cadman.
I'm good until Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Goodhouse.
No, the only thing I was going to do is just do since it's a topic, is just remind people to vote, and those people that are in favor of the levy, just make sure to tell people to vote for it.
Thank you. Ms. Voigt.
I'm good. I just wanted to clarify that I retract my request for the library information because we have one more year to figure that out. So I do not need that on Thursday, but I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Snyder.
Vote.
Absolutely. Councilor Newton.
I have nothing else.
Okay. Many of you go on Nextdoor or some of the local chats. That's where we're going to find current public input, misunderstanding, misinformation, and the rest of it. I don't know what the percentages of ballots has already been cast, but we may be able to make a few votes difference by taking a look at those sites the next day or two before ballots are dropped off at the boxes. Thank you all. We will recess till Thursday evening at 6:30, unless anybody has one last thing to say. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Recess till Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.